Tim had been a park ranger for a very long time, and he was passionate about what he did. He followed the same path every day to keep an eye on the animals' whereabouts and water supplies. He was astounded by what he saw every day, despite the fact that nothing much changed. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. However, he realized that something terrible had occurred when he saw this specific nest. For the last 3 years, Tim had gone by this nest almost every day. He had observed its construction with great interest throughout the years, and he could still clearly recall the day it had first emerged. Ordinarily, he could already hear the birds singing joyfully in the distance. However, it was quiet today. Somewhere in the park he could hear other sounds, like leaves rustling and birds tweeting, but there was silence surrounding this tree. In all the years the nest had been in the park, nothing like this had ever occurred. In addition, not a single bird was visible in this area. Tim could usually see a couple birds jumping about on the nest, and on really slow days, he might even see them bringing back twigs to further enlarge the nest. He moved cautiously toward the tree, not wanting to frighten away any birds that may be nesting within. Ultimately, apart from the quiet, everything appeared perfectly normal. Tim didn't want to bother the birds if they were there, but he wasn't positive they weren't. He ultimately made the decision to wait to act. Maybe all of this had a completely reasonable rationale, and he didn't want to break into the bird's house without a valid cause. He withdrew as a result, vowing to check again the next day. He was planning to act if the nest still appeared to be empty. Tim could not get rid of the uneasy sensation he had throughout the day. He prayed that everything would be normal and the birds would be chirping when he came to the park the next day. This was not going to occur, of course. We shouldn't go ahead of ourselves, but he would even eventually contact the cops. Tim got at the park early the next day. He just had to go to the tree and check on the nest again, and he did so right away. He knew as soon as he saw it that something wasn't right, but he persuaded himself not to jump to any judgment just yet. He saw some odd markings on the ground as he got closer to the tree. He was unable to identify them and was certain that no animal, at least not one that was known to be in the park, could have created them. Oh no! Considering all the potential threats that may have entered this area, he spoke such words. For a minute, Tim became quite concerned, but then, looking around the tree carefully, he decided that the birds had probably not been assaulted. He reasoned that whatever had happened, the birds had not been damaged badly because there were no feathers or injured birds on the ground. He wanted to peer inside the nest to fully comprehend what was happening, but the tree was too tall for him to do so. He then proceeded to the ranger station and gathered all the gear he needed. He usually walked around the park, but this time he used a vehicle. He unloaded the ladder and set it down close to the tree when he got there. He was rather excited to see inside the nest, even though it was trembling as he ascended. The birds would have flown out of the nest in fear normally due to the ladder's rattling and clanking, but this time they stayed put. For Tim, this was just further evidence that he was onto something, and he grew more and more certain by the moment that the nest would be empty. Of course, he wouldn't know for sure until he had a peek inside. He had taken a variety of equipment with him because there was no other way to accomplish this except by sawing through the nest. His eyes widened in shock at what he saw as soon as he ascended far enough on the ladder to have a closer view at the nest. "What? How is this even possible?" he cried out. He was so astonished that he nearly lost his balance and tumbled down the ladder. You see, the birds inside this nest had shelter since it was typically rather thick. However, Tim was certain that the birds themselves had not caused this enormous hole in the nest. Thus, the query persisted. By whom had it been done? Tim's concerns were validated when he eventually got a chance to peek inside the nest thanks to this opening. It included no birds at all. However, this does not imply that the nest was deserted entirely. Instead, he went down the ladder to get his phone and notify the police as soon as he discovered something inside that shouldn't have been there. Tim scrambled down the ladder, his pulse pounding from the shock of seeing the nest empty. His voice strained as he described what he had discovered. He called the police, puzzled and worried. He talked about the unusually empty nest and the peculiar object he found within. Anticipating haste from the police, he awaited their reaction with bated breath, praying they would recognize the gravity of the situation. Tim's sense of urgency was not shared over the phone by the cops, though. Their tone was dismissive, implying that it was likely the work of an animal or a minor anomaly. They told Tim not to worry too much and to keep an eye on it, since they weren't convinced it was anything the police should look into. As he stood there by himself in the peaceful park, Tim became frustrated. The apathy of the cops hurt. What he saw wasn't normal, he knew that. However, his worries were dismissed. The nest's mystery tormented him. Should he investigate more, believing his gut feeling that something was wrong, or should he just leave it go, as the cops advised? Tim struggled with his choice for a while, but it was obvious. He would act if the cops failed to do so. He couldn't help but feel uneasy about the nest and everything in it. His irritation gave way to determination. He would launch his own inquiry, gather proof, and record everything. He was now a man on a mission, not merely a park ranger. Tim went back to the nest and started his own research. He examined the area under the tree, searching for any clues that may clarify the state of the nest. Footsteps, abandoned objects, or anything unusual. It was crucial to be exhaustive and impartial. He began to put together the mystery of the quiet nest and its contents by taking notes and pictures. Tim's eyes searched the area surrounding the nest with great care. He searched for any disruption, any clue that would explain the enigma surrounding the nest. Broken branches, moved dirt, strange markings, anything that didn't seem right. No matter how little the observation, he recorded it all. Every piece of evidence might hold a clue to the mystery surrounding what transpired in this once active nest. Tim tried to get in touch with his other rangers in case they had seen something he had missed. He questioned all of them. "Have you seen anything unusual around the big nest lately?" Though their answers differed, none of them had seen anything noteworthy. But Tim remained unwavering in his resolve. He was aware that occasionally the tiniest, most easily missed element can hold the secret to unlocking a mystery. Tim then went up to park visitors. He asked nicely, "Have you noticed anything strange around the big nest on your walks?" The majority shook their heads. However, several reported hearing strange noises or seeing shadows close to the nest. Tim took note of each account, even if they were hazy. Tim arranged his notes and pictures in his office again, trying to see a pattern. The information was few and unclear. Strange noises heard by guests, his colleagues' failure to make any unexpected findings, and the nest's quiet. Tim gazed at the data, attempting to make sense of these seemingly unrelated pieces and piece them together into a cohesive tale. What was that nest all about? Tim moved his attention back to the tree and its surrounds. At that point, he spotted a pattern in the markings close to the tree's base that was nearly hidden by the undergrowth. These were neither accidental scrapes or aging signs. They were purposeful, even systematic. However, what were they trying to say? The enigma surrounding the quiet nest was further deepened by this unexpected finding. Tim realized something as he studied the strange markings by the tree. These indicators clearly showed evidence of human intervention. They were not the creations of animals. The positioning and arrangement of the markings all pointed to a purposeful activity on the part of the person. This was a turning point in Tim's research. The formerly hushed nest was now a place where people were involved. Additional examination turned up additional telling indicators. Tim discovered tracks in the leaves that were too big and clear to belong to any park animal. There were faint but noticeable tool marks in the bark of a nearby tree. These were the outcome of certain deliberate activities. They were not random. Tim felt an increasing feeling of urgency as he recorded every footprint and imprint, and his heart raced. Tim began to recognize a pattern, recalling the visitors' descriptions of shadows and noises. He recalled having first discounted the possibility that he had seen lights in the park after hours. Their actions, the objects they were using, and the times of their visits all suggested a relationship to the strange happenings in the nest. Tim realized he was onto something big. He had to keep watching and collect enough proof to show that they were involved in whatever was happening in his park. When Tim discovered a letter that said, "Stop looking where you shouldn't," pinned to his office door, his inquiry took an unsettling turn. It was a clear and menacing message. His spying had been spotted and someone wasn't amused about it. This revelation not only made Tim shiver, but it also gave him confidence that he was headed in the correct direction. Even with that dire warning, Tim was not going to back down. The threat, if anything, strengthened his resolve. While he was aware that the hazards were increasing, so too was the significance of his research. Tim became more determined, realizing that giving up would mean letting whatever was going on in the park go out of control. Tim followed his instinct and went down an overgrown path he hadn't noticed before. It was nestled among dense forest in a less visited area of the park. He cautiously proceeded through and discovered that it led to a remote location hidden from view from the main trails. For someone looking to stay under the radar, it was the ideal location. Tim made some startling findings in this secret location. Along with many empty cages of varying sizes, he discovered a few tools that didn't seem appropriate in a nature reserve. These objects suggested illicit activity, maybe capturing wildlife or something more nefarious. Tim used his camera to record everything, feeling a great deal of responsibility for what he discovered. The authorities were intrigued by this suggestion that the nest held a secret. Tim had made a calculated decision to enlist the police's help and guide them to the source of the mystery. Tim's testimony persuaded the police, who decided to work with him. For Tim, it was a momentous occasion. At last, his perseverance and hard work had paid off. They came up with a strategy to look into it more. Tim experienced optimism and a sense of affirmation. Now that he had the government on his side, they could investigate the mystery surrounding the park and the nest in greater detail. Tim presented all of his evidence to the authorities during a meeting. He showed the pictures of the equipment and cages, the suspicious group's visitation patterns, and his observations of the odd actions occurring around the nest. As the cops listened carefully, their doubts about the extent of possible unlawful activity in the park began to grow. Tim started planning an operation with the police to find out just how much was being done illegally in the park. Tim and the cops made an astonishing find during the sting operation. It concealed a horde of endangered animal eggs in the nest. These eggs were not from the park, and it was against the law and hazardous to the ecology to have them there. This finding was the final piece in the puzzle connecting the enigmatic actions in the park to the smuggling of animals. A startling discovery was made once the eggs were examined. They belonged to a wider network of illicit wildlife traders. Endangering endangered species, the smugglers had been utilizing the park as a covert center for their illegal activities. This network, working beneath the cover of the park's natural beauty, was more broad and well-organized than anybody had imagined. Tim had a vital role in the sting operation. With his in-depth knowledge of the park, he assisted the police in setting up their position so as to apprehend the smugglers without drawing attention to themselves. His knowledge of the topography of the park and the actions of the suspicious group came in very handy. Normally a park ranger, Tim found himself in the middle of an undercover mission. The procedure worked as planned. After being apprehended with the rare eggs, the smugglers were taken into custody. Tim's evidence collection and the police's astute preparation resulted in an efficient and quick apprehension. Tim and the police celebrated this moment as a victory since it signaled the end of the smugglers' illicit operations in the park and the start of justice for the animals they put in peril. The depth of the smugglers' operations was revealed upon their apprehension. A sophisticated network engaged in the illicit trafficking in endangered animals, and their eggs was discovered during the inquiry. One aspect of their extensive unlawful operations had been the nest in the park. Thanks to Tim's hard work and teamwork with the police, they were able to bust a large-scale wildlife smuggling operation. Now apprehended, the smugglers had to deal with the legal fallout from their deeds. The seriousness of wildlife smuggling was highlighted by the court procedures, which exposed the extent of their illicit operations. Given that they were given sentences appropriate to their offenses, justice was done. This result was a major win for the preservation of wildlife and evidence of the value of conservation and vigilance work. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.